Hi everybody, and welcome back to our series on the 10 most common behavioral issues associated with dogs. In today's video, our 6th video, we are going to discuss jumping up, why your dog does it, and what you can do to get your dog to stop doing it. My name is Cori MacGregor, and I am the training program coordinator at A Walk in the Park located in Maumee, Ohio. So why is your dog jumping up? Well, if you watched our video on begging, which was the 5th video in this series, you probably learned that your dog is doing that behavior because you have somehow reinforced it. And the same is true for jumping up. So if that video resonated with you, you may also find that you're having issues with jumping up with your dog at home as well. So if you think about the times when your dog performs this behavior, more than likely it's when you first arrived home from work, or you have guests that are arriving to your house. Your dog is very excited, especially if they're a social dog and they really enjoy interaction with other people. Then that excitement really gets them going, and sometimes they can't really contain their excitement, and it's expressed through this jump up. Now, another reason why they will specifically jump up out of excitement versus, perform another behavior is that if you think about when you greet your dog, you first get home, you have a big smile on your face. You're like, "Hey, buddy, how was your day?" All of that is coming from your face. The happy expression. Remember from a previous video, we talked about, I think it was the first one, barking. We talked about how vocalizations are a normal part of communication, but a dog's primary form of communication is going to be body language and facial expressions. So when we're wide open and our faces are bright and we're making direct eye contact, and we're also using an excited tone of voice when we say, "Hey, nice to see you," that's going to really rev up the energy level of your dog, and they can tell by those facial expressions that you are also excited to see them. Now, given that that's coming from your face and from your dog's point of view, you're up here and your dog is down here. So the best way to get to your face, where all of that attention is coming from, is to jump up to get to it. Your dog jumps up, they nose you in the face, they lick you in the face. They're really just trying to get closer to your face, where that energy is coming from, that excitement is coming from, that greeting is going to come from. Okay, so if you are up here and they're down here, you're going to have to make a little bit of a compromise so that they're not coming up here to greet you. Now, the reason why your dog is continuing to do this, so we've established why they do it in the first place, but why do they continue to do it? Well, just like with begging, that behavior has been rewarded or reinforced in some way. And you probably have been doing it unconsciously or, unknowing. So one of the first things that we do when we want our dog to get back down is use our hands to push them back down. But dogs don't use their paws for things like that. Think about us being primates and how we, are, dexterous with our hands. We use our hands to pick things up, to push things away from us, to move things around. That is how we manipulate our world, is with our hands. Your dog really doesn't do that nearly as much as humans do. You don't, other than when they're puppies, they really don't use their paws too much for communicating or interacting. So when you're using your hands, that's going to kind of draw out that puppy behavior in your dog to want to play. Puppies will kind of paw at each other and slap around as an invitation for play and part of their play style when they're young. So if you use your hands to push your dog down, now it's playtime. So they're jumping up more. And when we're giving attention to that behavior, remember, we've said before, if you give attention to a behavior, any kind of attention, you are reinforcing it. You're making it stronger. You're making it so that it's more likely to happen again in the future. So the one thing you really need to pay attention to, do you use your hands to then push your dog back down when they jump up at you? If so, guess what? You've reinforced that behavior by giving it attention and encouraging your dog to continue to jump up because your dog thinks you're playing a game with them at that point. So we're going to talk about some things you can do to discontinue this behavior, to kind of squash this behavior, extinguish this behavior, as we call it, here coming up in just a second. Now, you have to be careful, and you'll have to be really consistent. Again, consistency is going to be key here. And that means that every single person in the house has to do this, and every single person visiting your house is going to have to do this. So we'll talk about some things you can do to manage this behavior if you have guests coming over who aren't necessarily going to understand or be on the same page of your training process with your dog. So one of the first things to realize is that you don't want to use any negative methods here. We've talked about this. Our facility is a positive only training facility. We don't use negative methods or fear tactics of any kind, at all. So relying on positive only methods is going to help maintain that good relationship that you have with your dog, so that going forward, when it's time to train something new or just work on something else, you are working with a certain amount of trust and value there. So the first thing you don't want to do is yell or punish your dog in any way. Yelling frightens them, punishing them frightens them. Depending on your method of punishment, it could physically hurt them. So scolding your dog in this situation, when they're excited to see you, they're jumping up to get closer to you. Especially if you've given that initial greeting where you're like, hey buddy, and then they respond in kind. Scolding your dog is like getting a really weird response from you. They think that they're doing what you've encouraged them to do, what you wanted them to do. So then scolding them in some way is confusing and sends mixed messages, and it doesn't allow your dog an open line of communication if they can't predict the way you're going to respond in different situations when you're interacting with them. So don't scold your dog, yell, or punish your dog. Most certainly don't lift your knee and give them a jab to the ribs, because that can be physically painful. Again, harming your relationship with your dog for future interactions and future training processes. So that's really not a good way to go about working with this behavior with your dog. But I will tell you, like with our begging behavior, it's actually a pretty simple one to stop. So when I get reports from clients or calls from clients that say, the biggest problem that we have is that he or she really likes to jump up. They're always jumping up. And this is a behavior that I struggled with my dog as well when we first adopted her. She was about a year old, and so this behavior was really well established. And she's, as I've mentioned, she's half German Shepherd, half Boxer, so she's a pretty big dog, around 90 pounds. And she's tall too, so when she jumps up on you, she can put her paws practically up on your shoulders. And so that's difficult to deal with as an adult, but then when she interacts with children, and I do have children, that can also be problematic. So working with this behavior is actually not too difficult as long as you have some consistency, and I have some personal experience dealing with it. So the thing to keep in mind is, again, anytime you bring attention to a behavior, you're reinforcing it. So the best thing to do is to simply ignore it. Now, this is going to be a little bit difficult because we have to consciously be aware of what we're doing when this behavior is occurring. Are we using our hands like we are inclined to, as our nature implies, to push your dog back down? If that's your first reaction, tuck your hands up into your armpits like this and turn your back to your dog. If you turn away, you're kind of giving a little time out there. And again, we mentioned they're trying to get to your face. So you cut that off. If you turn your back, you cut off all access to attention. They cannot see your face. You're not making eye contact. You're not talking to them. You are not touching them. You're taking away all of those things that your dog is striving to get from you. So when we eliminate all of those opportunities for them to receive behavior when they're performing a behavior we don't want them to do, they start realizing that this particular behavior no longer gets me what it used to get me. It no longer gets me the attention that I'm seeking. So what do we do now to encourage them to keep those paws on the ground when we do want to greet them? So we're not looking at them, we're not talking to them, and we're not touching them when they are jumping up. You can also give an off cue, though that should come a little bit later into this process once they start understanding what it is they are supposed to be doing versus what they're not supposed to be doing. And that off cue is going to be a great resource for you, because anytime your dog's paws are on something that they should not be, you're going to say off. I like using the off cue. A lot of people will use down, but I don't want you to confuse that with the cue to have your dog lay down. So reserve down for lay down and use off whenever you want your dog to get off of something, such as the furniture, or when she jumps up and puts her paws up on the counter, or her nose up on the table. You can use that off cue for those situations as well. So when we turn our back to our dog and we're not looking, talking, or touching our dog during this jump up, what you are immediately then going to do, as soon as those paws get back down on the ground or on the floor, you are going to then quickly turn around and then reward your dog with the behavior that they were seeking in the first place. Rewards don't always have to be food or treats. Rewards can be anything your dog is willing to work for, or anything that your dog desires. So in this particular situation, your dog clearly desires your attention. So give it. Give it as soon as those paws are back on the floor. We are now kind of drawing a line in the sand, making it nice black and white situation. Paws are up, no attention. Paws are down, here's all of the attention that you were looking for in the first place. So, be really consistent and stick to that routine. Your dog is going to quickly understand that this jumping up behavior no longer gets me the attention that it used to. And if I want attention, I should stay down here. Sometimes coming home, if you crate your dog, that can be a particularly difficult situation because your dog tends to have a lot of energy coming out of that crate. So what I suggest that you do is, when you open that crate door, meet them at their level, so that when they come out, they don't feel like they have to jump up to get to that attention. It's already there at that level. And I recommend that as well. If you're coming in the front door, it might not be as easy to anticipate your dog being right there. But if you can get down to their level as soon as they approach you and to greet you, you're going to head off that behavior before it has a chance to start. So if you can prevent the behavior from happening in the first place, that's going to be a really great way to lead into this process of eliminating this behavior. And then, as long as you're not looking at, talking to, or touching your dog while their paws are off of the ground, that is going to further drive that point home. Okay, so just remember, anytime you give attention to a behavior, it rewards it, makes it stronger. And when your dog is performing that behavior, you're going to ignore it as much as possible. No looking, no talking, no touching. Those are the 3 rules for, managing or working on eliminating this jumping up behavior. Now, when you're anticipating guests and you know that your dog is going to jump up on them when they arrive, there's a few options for you here. The first option would be to keep your dog either crated or in a separate room while your guests arrive, and then once your guests are comfortable and they're seated, you can go ahead and bring your dog out on a leash and keep that leash, the distance from you to your dog, nice and short, so that they don't have the opportunity to jump up on a person in the first place. And then kind of make sure your guests do interact with your dog. If you have guests that don't necessarily enjoy interacting with dogs, you may not want to have your dog present for the time your guests are there. However, I encourage you to not rearrange your dog's environment so that they become uncomfortable in their house. While we don't want to make our guests uncomfortable, one thing that we should be encouraging our guests to understand is that they are coming into not only your home, but your dog's home. So while you would not want to be made to feel uncomfortable in your own home, neither should your dog. So set up your dog's environment in such a way that they are not made to feel uncomfortable by the presence of your guests, and that way your guests can also feel comfortable as well. Now, if your guests are comfortable with your dog being out and want to interact with your dog, give them some pointers. Okay, so when your dog, when they first arrive, you can either have them crated and then bring them out on a leash, or just start with them on a leash when your guests are showing up. This can be a little bit over arousing for your dog, a little bit overwhelming in the beginning if you're trying to manage the dog and greet your guests and let your guests know what's going on. So whichever way you feel will be easiest for you to manage it is totally up to you. But once your dog has started to calm down and your guests are ready to start interacting with your dog, have your guests remember those 3 points. No looking, no talking, no touching. If your dog jumps up on your guests, you can then use that off cue once you've introduced it. But make sure your guests know, tuck their arms away, turn their back to the dog, and as soon as the dog is back down on the ground, they can then interact. If it seems like your guests aren't able to work with that, it can be a little bit challenging at first if they haven't had the opportunity to practice or be consistent with it. So if that's fine, if you find that that's challenging for your guests to deal with, or your dog is particularly persistent, then you may want to consider keeping your dog on a leash while your guests are present to give them both a little bit of some leniency there. Your guests can have some time where they know that your dog is not going to be jumping up on them, and you can kind of keep control of the training process there as well. So if you have any questions about how to get your dog to stop jumping up, although as long as you're consistent and you think of that as a black and white situation where there's no attention when you do this, you get lots of attention when you do this, you should be pretty much good to go. But if you have any questions regarding jumping up or other training information, you can give us a call at our facility. The phone number is 419-475-4101. You can also reach me directly at my number, 419-930-6229. You can also email me at training@awitp.net. We look forward to seeing you next time for our 7th video in the series. Have a great evening. Bye.